Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander Core Studio. Welcome to the show, and to no one's surprise, okay, I was a little surprised. There's like 1 day left of full spoiler season because of the, well, pre-con still coming out, and yet there are leaks of some of the pre-con cards. So of course, let's jump into them. So, I just want to reiterate, these are not officially confirmed yet, though they will be confirmed either today or tomorrow, or we'll find out that they're fake. But most likely they are real because almost every single one of the things we've seen so far, other than Colossal Eldrazi Maw, has been real. That one was kind of obvious. Regardless, let's jump into it. Chittering Dispatcher, and I will include the actual images of the cards, which are sometimes grainy or tiny or at a weird angle. At the end of this episode, they'll be scrolling so you can see those, as well as any reprints or other cards that we've already seen so far that have been leaked, that I've talked about in previous episodes. Regardless, this is a custom version of the card just to make it easier to discuss. Here we go. Chittering Dispatcher, a 2/3 Eldrazi drone that costs 3 mana in green with Devoid and Myriad. When it leaves the battlefield, create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token with sacrifice this creature, add colorless. So, when I first read this, I kind of just skipped over the Myriad and I was like, this is terrible. Do I want a 2/3 that just like when it leaves the battlefield makes me a spawn? I mean, I guess it's not like terrible because it's not on death trigger. It's like whenever it leaves the battlefield, so it could be like if it's exiled, or more likely if you blink it, that kind of thing. But yeah, because it has Myriad, that makes it a lot better. Because essentially every single time you attack with this, again, let's say, I mean, you're attacking with, 3 opponents. Cool. Like Commander, and then you get 2 other copies of it that are attacking the other players. Let's say the original survives. The other 2 tokens either survive or they, again, are sacrificed at the end step. Myriad, is it sacrifice or exile? I think it's sacrifice. Regardless, it doesn't matter. They leave the battlefield, you make 2 spawn. There you go. So with that Myriad, you keep making more and more spawn as long as you keep this around and keep swinging with it in, battlefield, in combat, if I could talk. It's early. Yeah, this is very interesting. Obviously, there could be some combos that work with this as well, being able to create tokens when it leaves the battlefield. Again, I talked about blinking earlier. Yeah, it's an interesting card. Eldrazi Tribal will love it, obviously. But yeah, if you kind of just like need some like quick ramp in a deck, maybe some creature-based ramp, this could really help you out as well. A Riskrat style might like it too, because this can make a lot of tokens too, of course, that you can just sacrifice for mana. It's a very interesting card. Moving on. The Talon Gates of Madara. Yeah, I think that's just how that would be said, right? The Talon Gates of Madara. Land Gate. That makes sense. When it enters the battlefield, up to 1 target creature faces out. That's weird. Tap for a colorless. Pay 1 and tap at 1 mana of any color. Pay 4. Put it from your hand onto the battlefield. Very interesting. So, this is a couple of things that are going on with it that are, well, unique. First of all, this is a gate. Gate tribal decks. Love that, obviously. More gates. More crazy things you can do. Win with weird win conditions. Enter in the battlefield. Again, 1 creature facing out. That can be a good way to be like, okay, I need to get through in combat, but that player over there has got a really good blocker. I'm going to play my land for the turn and say, your creature's gone temporarily. Again, it phases back in later. And again, reminder with phasing, it's a bit different than like, say, blinking something. It's not going to like exile or anything. It's just like, that doesn't exist, but it does. And all the things on it stay on it. But they also are elsewhere too. Okay, anyways, carry on. But yes, you can use that either on an opponent's creature, let's say, again, to get something through. Or maybe you're like, I don't want that player to have it until their next turn for some reason. Or let's say, like, you want to save one of your own creatures. Then you're like, I'm going to Wrath. So you just play this land, and then your creature goes away. And then you essentially say, oh, okay, now Wrath of God. And my creature will come back later. Also, the interesting thing about this one, though, is this land can kind of ramp itself, if I could talk. There I combined ramp and land. There you go, lamp. Yeah, because you can, again, just pay for, get it right into play. Now, is that all that efficient? No. But also, there is kind of that aspect to this where it's also like a, again, temporary removal spell with like phasing out an opponent's creature, or a way to save one of your own creatures, which is very interesting. So, yeah, it's a very weird card. It's kind of like a land, but also a spell in a way. And it's like a filter land. Obviously, I didn't say that yet, but just tapping the right colors, not that great, but it can filter mana if you need to. It's not that effective at doing so. I mean, just like other filter lands, it's like, okay, it's ineffective. It doesn't produce 2 mana, it produces 1, so you're kind of going down 1 mana because you're tapping this to do so. But yeah, that kind of like phasing aspect is very interesting, and there's certain kinds of decks that really like that. And the fact that you can actually just like ramp this land out without utilizing it as a land for a turn is very cool. And it's in speed too. Moving on, Horizon of Progress, a land that has tap, pay 1 life, add 1 mana of any type that a land you control could produce. Interesting. Pay 3 tap, you may put a land card from your hand on the battlefield. Tap, pay 1 tap, sacrifice this, draw a card. This has a lot going on. I mean, first of all, this is like bad mana fix, not bad mana fixing, but it is. Oh, I mean, it's dependent upon lands that you already have. So, like, once you get, like, say again, obviously, like, Command Tower in play, or like all the colors that you have with, like, you know, your different basics or whatnot, great. This can tap for any of your colors, but early on, it's not going to help you fix your mana in the way that you'd want, obviously, and you do have to lose life to do this. That being said, this is very good in that you can, again, ramp with this land by paying 3 and tapping this, get a land from your hand into play. So it's like you have to play an extra land that turn. There's already another one, I can't remember the name of it, that kind of does that as well, but that one only produces colors, I believe, too. So this has a little bit more flexibility when it comes to fixing your mana later in the game. And again, I do say later, but it could be as early as like turn 3. Okay, I'm in a 2-color deck. I've got my 2 colors in play. I played this perfect. This can tap for any of my colors, and I do lose life while I do that, though. On top of that, though, you can sacrifice this, draw cards. So again, late in the game, that can be very good, having that flexibility, being like, oh, okay, I already utilized this, you know, for fixing mana. I already utilized this for ramping. Now I'm in trouble, and I need to draw a card, and if I don't draw the right card, I lose. It's a good panic button later in the game. So it's got a lot of interesting aspects to it. We shall see really how much this sees play. Moving on. Copy land. Lots of things about lands, apparently. Enchantment for 2 and 8 blue, you may have copy land into the battlefield. A copy of any land on the battlefield, except it's an enchantment issued to other types. Interesting. So, I'm sure there's some crazy things that you can do this that I'm not thinking of right away. But being able to copy any land on the battlefield for 3 mana, yeah, I mean, like, that's very nice, obviously. Being like, oh, an opponent, and then you've got more selections, obviously, when you're in Commander. You have 3 opponents. It's any land, not just your own. So, yeah, if an opponent has, like, a command tower, fantastic. Great mana fixing. Or, again, any, like, amazing land out there, like, say, like, a Gaia's Cradle that is OP, you can copy those as well. Now, the thing is, it being an enchantment makes it better in some ways, but worse in some ways. Like, an Enchantress-style deck really likes that because, cool, like, you get, like, your Enchantress triggers, Constellation triggers, everything like that. Like, the number of enchantments in play, things matter as well. That being said, it also makes it more susceptible to removal than just a normal land would be. So it being an enchantment land means that, hey, oh, someone cast Farewell or whatever kind of massive board wipe that takes out enchantments. Cool, that is also gone now versus if it was just a land, it would not be. So there are some benefits to it. There are some downsides to it. It is kind of like ramp in a way, though. Somewhat protected ramp because, again, it is a land enchantment, which are 2 decently hard things to deal with for the most part. But yeah, it is ramp in a way because you're like 3 mana, copy a land. Obviously, if you copy something that, you know, can tap for 2, fantastic, or more, you know, Gaia's Cradle. But yeah, at a base level, it's going to be a slower version of most, you know, ramp spells, a slower version of, not a slower version of most lands, but again, you're dependent on what's on the table. Obviously, for decks that have specific types of lands that like really want to get extra copies of them, like say like Locusts, those can be really good with this. So yeah, this is an interesting card for sure. For the right deck with the right lands in it, I think that you could utilize it, or for an Enchantress style deck that's like, okay, cool, I want some ramp that is also an enchantment. There's other ramp too, but still, it's interesting. Moving on. Rampant Frogantua. Cool name. A 3/3 frog with trample that costs 2 and a green. It gets +10/+10 for each player who has lost the game. I love cards that like mention players losing the game. I think that's kind of cool. Obviously, you know, that's a very more commander thing because like if you're like playing one-on-one, it's like, all right, this gets +10/+10. If one of us loses the game, oh, the game's over. Okay, well, I guess it's a 3/3. So yeah, this, I mean, has the potential in commander to be a 13/13 for 3 mana, or a 23/23 for 3 mana. Or also, I mean, I guess if you have, you know, more commander players at the table, you can play with more than 4, obviously. Yeah, cool. It can get even bigger than that. But yeah, it could be an absolutely monstrously large creature that, again, has trample. Kind of like Mana Gorge or Hydra, but like, instead of building it through just casting spells throughout the game and your opponent's casting spells, it's like built by you taking out players or anyone taking out players. But yeah, this is going to just be immediately large later in the game. On top of that, though, whenever it deals counter to each player, you may mill that many cards, put any of your land cards from among them on the battlefield tapped. I don't know if you need really that much ramp with this kind of thing, but like early on, this can already just be pretty good. Like you play this pretty quickly. Like let's say just like Land of Elves into this turn 2, turn 3 swing, and you might just get lucky and hit 3 lands, and you're like, oh, I just really exploded onto the scene with a bunch of lands. Later in the game, obviously, yeah, being able to just hit for, again, 13 or 23 and just getting a ton of lands to play too, that can also put you over the top. It's interesting. I mean, self-mill decks will like this. Land ramp decks can like it as well. It is random on what you're hitting, obviously, unless you've got ways to stack the top of your library. It is, you may mill. It is not milling that player. So there is that distinction. Yeah, it's interesting for sure. Like, I guess, I'm trying to think again, like for my Mr. Orfeo deck, that's all about power and like flinging things. Like, would I want this, even if it was budget friendly? I'm not sure if it will be. I don't think it will be. Probably not, because like I don't want to depend on having to take someone else out to actually have a giant creature. Now, it is nice once you do take out one player, because 13 for 3 mana is not a lot at all. So, like, Power Matters type synergies might want it. We shall see. It's a very interesting card for sure. Moving on. Last Attempt Quarry, a 1/3 desert. Oh, it is not a land creature. See, there's a mistake right there. There's a slight mistake, so my apologies. You'll have to see at the end of the episode, but just pretend this doesn't say land creature. It's just a desert. That's not a 1/3, so there we go. Tap for a colorless, tap sacrifice a creature, add 1 mana of any color. Blame it in the comments below. Pay X and 2 and tap, sacrifice a desert, exile target creature card with mana value X from your graveyard, create a token's copy of it, except a 4/4 black zombie, activate only as a sorcery. So this one, again, being a desert, again, desert tribal decks, obviously will be like, yeah, that's great. But also, this is just basically like, oh gosh, what's the one that you can just like sacrifice a creature? It taps for colors, tap, sacrifice creature. It's not bizarre. What is it? Oh, you can gain a life when you do so. Whatever that card is, this is very good, if not better than that. Obviously, for like life gain synergies, that one is better in some ways, but this one's just like, oh, I get a better benefit out of this. Being able to fix your mana with that is huge. And of course, you might be thinking like, well, what kinds of decks want to sacrifice creatures? Well, aristocrat style decks. Decks that get value from sacrificing creatures, just having a land that can do that, or really crazy 99 land Child of Lar decks might want that too. So there you go. But being able to sacrifice creatures to actually fix your mana can be absolutely massive. On top of this being like, oh, by the way, you can just like reanimate a creature. I mean, you're making a 4/4 copy of it, which again can be better, can be worse, depending on how large the creature is. But yeah, being able to reanimate a creature by sacrificing a desert does take a decent amount of mana to do so. Again, the bigger that creature is, the more mana investment you need with this. But yeah, being able to sacrifice this desert or another desert to get that outcome can be huge. Again, keep in mind like ETBs for that creature that you might be having come into play. That can be massive, or any other triggers, etc., etc. And obviously, since it is a token, as long as it's not legendary, you can like populate and get extra copies of it as well. So that can be absolutely massive for those kinds of decks too. It's a really cool land. Again, not a creature, just a desert that is a land and not a 1/3. So keep that in mind. My apologies again. Moving on. Speaking of deserts, Desert Warfare, an enchantment for 4 mana in green. Whenever you sacrifice a desert, and whenever a desert card is put in your graveyard from your hand or library, put that card on the battlefield under your control at the beginning of next end step. Beginning of combat of your turn. If you control 5 more deserts, create that many 1/1 green, red, and white. Same warrior creature tokens, they gain haste. This is a massive card for desert decks, obviously. Yeah, that is huge. Again, desert cards being sacrificed, you're going to be doing that with deserts because they have sacrifice abilities. You also have, obviously, again, ways to potentially mill or discard deserts. When you do, they just come right into play, which is lovely. Or beginning the next end step, they come back into play, which is huge. And, of course, the more deserts you have in play, the more Sand Warriors you get, which is massive. So, yeah, this can be great in a desert deck. Outside of deserts, you probably won't use this. Moving on, unless you get ways to like manipulate what kinds of lands you have. Moving on, Wonderscape Sage, a 1/3 moon folk wizard with flying that costs 1 and a blue. Tap, return a land you control to its owner's hand, draw a card, then discard a card unless that land had a non-basic land type. Keep in mind, non-basic land type. So again, like deserts, gates, Urzas, because that's a thing for some reason. Not just, that's kind of weird that it's like Urzas. It's like, yeah, I get it, but like that's just weird. I know it has to be that way, but like it's weird. Okay, any non-basic land type. Cool. So if you start bouncing those back to your hand, you get to keep your card. Not keep your card, but not have to discard a card in addition to drawing. This is interesting. Like, I mean, obviously, like a wizard deck could consider it. a landfall deck can definitely consider it being like, okay, cool, I want to bring a land back to my hand anyways because I've got like all these additional lands I can play, or just my land drop for the turn and I want my landfall triggers again. So bounce a land back to my hand, play that land again. Great, I get to draw a card. Sure, I have to discard a card. That's fine. It's basically either looting. This is either like a Merfolk looter or just a strictly better Merfolk looter that just draws you cards because you are bouncing back, again, deserts or other kinds of lands that have non-basic land types as well. So yeah, what kinds of decks want this? Well, decks that utilize non-basic land types, but also just, I mean, if you have like a Merfolk looter, this is just like, I mean, it isn't the same thing as Merfolk looter, I guess, because you have to return the land back to your hand. There are going to be times you don't care that much about that because like you are just like resetting a land, which is nice. When you already have played, when you haven't played your land drop for the turn, you don't have a land in your hand. You just bounce your land back to your hand after you've already tapped it. And then you put it back into play and you get like an extra mana out of that as well, which is nice. But yeah, landfall decks as well, we'll definitely be considering this one too. Moving on, Trench Post. Speaking of non-basic land types, Locust. We got another kind of Locust. Tap for a colorless, pay 3 and tap target player mills a card for each Locust you control. That's kind of cool, being like a win condition out of Locust lands. When it comes to Commander, like what kinds of decks want this? I mean, the first one that came to my mind was like Orvar. Orvar can do some crazy things, is already heavily incentivized to make a bunch of Locusts. Is it Glimmer Post? Whatever the one is that like gives you a bunch of mana based on Locusts. You want a lot of those, which is nice. But you can also make multiple of these now and then just be like, I've got all the Locusts in the world. Mill you for a ton. And you've got yet another win condition in Orvar, which is lovely. Outside of that, what kinds of decks want this? Again, like non-basic land type decks, like the new, I mean, I'm sure this is coming from essentially that one precon that's like, okay, I've got a commander that can change my land types to all non-basic lands or all kinds of lands or whatever it is. So that makes sense. Outside of being a very specific card, though, maybe a colorless deck that cares about milling itself against target player. You can choose anyone. So yeah, it's interesting for sure. Sunken Palace. It's a land cave, yet another kind of land type. Enters battlefield, tap, taps for a blue, pay 1 a blue, tap, exile 7 cards from your graveyard, add blue. When you spend this mana to cast a spell or activate an ability, copy that spell or ability. You choose targets for the copy, and mana abilities can be copied as a reminder. A very interesting card for sure. It is slower, again. Enters battlefield, tap, taps for a blue. There's no like, hey, pay 3 life, comes to play untapped, or like, if you control an island, it comes to play tapped, or untapped. There is no condition that this comes to play untapped unless you have like an Amulet Vigor in play. Then that would. That being said, though, this is a very powerful ability. Yeah. Again, this can copy. It's not specifically, again, like the first time I read this, I was like, oh yeah, copy into sorceries. Oh wait, no. Copy a spell. Just any spell. Does not say, you know, non-permanent or whatever. It is any spell. So essentially, yeah, there is a bit of a cost to it. Like, not really. I mean, there's some building to get there. Again, you have to have a graveyard. You have to have 7 cards in your graveyard. If you have threshold with 7, you're like, oh, I lose my threshold. But that's very, you know, few and far between when you have that or care about that. That being said, if you have a decent amount of cards in your graveyard, you can just keep utilizing this. Again, you're going down basically 1 mana each time because you are paying 1 and a blue to tap it for just a blue. You're going down 1 mana. But being able to copy your things, that's massive. Being able to copy that or abilities too. So that's massive, potentially broken. That's huge. That is absolutely huge. So, I mean, I guess my first thought would be like self-mill decks, which tend to be a little bit in blue potentially. Self-mill decks that are just mill everyone. Be able to get a lot of things in your graveyard, or like wheel decks. Not the wheels that like reset your graveyard each time, but the wheels are like, hey, like Windfall, like discard your hand, draw that many. Or draw up to the, you know, whoever's got the most. Those kind of decks. Decks like to filter through their deck, like to draw a ton of cards, looting decks, that kind of stuff as well. If you've got a deck that can fill your graveyard consistently, this can be a house in your deck. Again, slightly going down on mana, barely, and being able to copy your spells or abilities, that is huge. Especially with commanders that have like really, really powerful abilities. Yeah, keep that in mind. So again, commanders that care about the graveyard, commanders that like to fill the graveyard, make sure you're considering that one. Finally, and thank you MTG Goldfish for your translated version on this one. I should have mentioned this one is actually not a leak. This one is official, I believe. A 4/4 Eldrazi Angel with Devoid, Flying and Vigilance, costs 6 mana in white. Enters the battlefield, sacrifice any number of creatures with base power numbers 1 or less. Create that many 4/4 colors Eldrazi Angel creatures with Flying and Vigilance. This is a finisher. This is a big finisher. If you've got a token strategy, if you've got a go wide strategy with a bunch of low to the ground creatures, this is disgusting. Disgusting again. it does say sacrifice other creatures with base power or toughness 1 or less. Keep that in mind. It is base power. So even if you, say, have a bunch of anthems in play, even if you have a bunch of ++1 counters on your creatures, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if your creatures have 30 power each. If their base power and toughness written on the card is 1 toughness or 1 power, that's all that matters, and all of a sudden you can change them all into amazing 4/4 Angel Eldrazi's that are flying and vigilant, and you probably have some token doublers as well, so you get even more of those. Pretty disgusting, pretty gross. Yeah, that's quite nice. So yeah, this is a card that is pretty cool. And again, it's a finish for those types of strategies. Also, like, I mean, I guess like a wall deck, a defender deck might want to consider this as well, because again, you're changing your walls into creatures that can actually hit, although you might have other win conditions with those as well. So yeah, again, like I'd say pretty much most of the time it's going to be a token strategy. Go wide tokens, make a bunch of 1/1s, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, cool. I changed them all into massive flying vigilant angels that are also Eldrazi. So there you go. Also, Eldrazi Tribe will consider it too, with like Eldrazi spawns, Eldrazi scions, turning those into giant Eldrazi angels can be quite nice as well. But now this episode is coming to a close. Again, my apologies for that land desert. That's not a land creature desert, which is not a land. My apologies. Blame any of the comments below. But also, make sure you stay tuned to this channel for more exciting spoilers, maybe leaks. I don't know. There's not that much time left, so we shall see. And also stay tuned for the other cards I'm going to be showing off right after I'm done talking that have either already been leaked previously and now are officially confirmed, or just the actual images of the cards that were leaked, so you can see that, yeah, I did mess up on that desert. So there you go. And of course, as always, thanks again, and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.